Welcome to the future home of the Museum of Howard County History. It's a work in progress. It's also known as the Old Gray Willows, right here just off the downtown square of Fayette, county seat of Howard County. And today I have with me Joe Jefferies. He's a Fayettean. Are you born and bred Fayettean?
Not quite. Always say darn close though. So I was born in Wisconsin, but my family moved down here when I was 10, and I've pretty much been in Fayette ever since, other than a short stint out of the state.
Okay, well, there's a handful of you people around here
Yeah.
that have come down from Wisconsin.
Yes.
I find that interesting. So that is Scandinavian?
Yes, my mom's side is entirely Scandinavian, so that's all Swedish, Danish, everything's Scandinavian. Then my dad's side is very English. So.
Oh, okay. So you grew up in Fayette and graduated from Fayette High School.
Correct, yes.
And what are you doing with yourself these days?
I graduated from Fayette High, then I went to Central Methodist for my first undergraduate degree. Went up to Chicago for a few years and then made my way back. Currently, I am in my master's program, so I'm getting 2 master's degrees, a Master of Social Work and a Master of Science in Disaster Resilience Leadership. I also work full-time for a large community health agency. I work at a behavioral health crisis center for them, where I'm a certified peer specialist. I additionally work on the board of In Missouri Pride Fest. I serve on the board of the Columbia Chorus. And then somewhere in my free time, I'm also running for the Missouri House of Representatives in the 48th District. So...
Well, you know what they say about Howard Countyans. We keep ourselves busy.
Yes, I certainly do. I managed to find every ounce of free time and wring it dry.
Yeah.
So,
well, Joe, let's talk about your run for State House.
yes.
So that title that you're running for, the position that you're running for is?
State representative.
State representative.
So the way I describe it to people that's real quick and easy to think about is that Missouri's government is a lot like the federal government. Everybody's pretty familiar with that. And in terms of structure, it's almost exactly the same, except instead of a president, you have a governor, and then we have a House of Representatives and a Senate, just like the federal government, except ours is called the General Assembly. I'm running for the House of Representatives side as a state representative.
And what is your district?
48, which includes Howard County, obviously, and then Cooper County, Sheridan County, and then a little bit of Western Randolph.
Okay, so the whole county.
The whole county of Howard, yes.
Okay.
And all of Sheridan, almost all of Cooper. There's a little tiny bit they cut off at the bottom, then just a teeny tiny bit of Randolph County on the western edge.
Okay, so are we a gerrymandered district?
Almost all districts in Missouri are gerrymandered. We are one of the ones that arguably you could say is less gerrymandered than others. Our district tends to be pretty cohesive in terms of demographics, pretty cohesive in terms of needs. However, as you really start to get closer to Kansas City, St. Louis, closer to Columbia, closer to Springfield, you really start to find where we've stretched some of the geographic boundaries of cities, added in a lot of rural space, done a lot of things to deeply gerrymander those districts. So,
okay. Can you talk a little bit about what the supermajority is and how that played into your decision to run for public office?
Absolutely. So the Republicans in the state of Missouri have had what's known as a supermajority in both chambers, so the House and the Senate, and have almost, for about the same amount of time, have almost always held the governor's office as well as almost every other statewide elected office. So what that means is that even if we had a Democratic governor, like when we had Jay Nixon, they have a veto-proof majority. So even if the governor were to turn around and veto any of their nonsense that they pass, they could very easily get the necessary minimum votes to override that veto and still make their bills law. We have seen this cause enormous harm to our communities, to our state. You know, we've seen the absolute erosion of public education. We've seen bills attacking women's reproductive freedom and access to abortion. We see bills that we know are going to fail legally, like they just this week passed a bill to defund Planned Parenthood, which they passed multiple times in the past, which has been struck down by the courts every time. We see this sort of behavior when you have a supermajority. There's nobody to check the power. There's nobody to challenge these ideas and these notions. So I could probably spend the next 2 hours telling you all the reasons why I'm running. But as I was looking at it, I realized that we have no chance of breaking the supermajority as long as we don't have people running. And in the 48th district in the 2022 cycle, we did not have a Democrat on the ballot. In fact, 40% of seats in Missouri for the state house, at least, were uncontested in 2022. And so it made sense. It sort of became a question of, if not you, who? If not now, when? I took up the call, and here and I'm running. So that way we have a chance to get a different message into the ears of folks in the 48th, and a chance to do our part to help break that supermajority down in Jeff City.
How long have they had this supermajority?
Over 2 decades. So it's been a long time that they have held complete power of the state. Again, there's a few exceptions to that, like when we had Jay Nixon as governor, who ran as a Democrat. We also, I believe, had Nicole Galloway as state auditor for a while. So there have been a few times where we've had Democrats in statewide seats, but for the better part of nearly 30 years now, a little bit under that, the Republicans have had full control, if not supermajority control of the state.
Who will you be running against?
My opponent is an incumbent Republican, Representative Tim Taylor of Bunston. He's a Cooper County guy. Representative Taylor, he was quoted in a Missouri Times article. He was quoted as not wanting to be a representative who was known for passing a lot of laws, but for preventing laws from passing that would harm his community, which, I can appreciate the last part. However, I think we've seen Representative Taylor vote yes on a lot of bills that will harm our communities. Representative Taylor, for example, just voted this week to expand school vouchers and universal school choice. Representative Taylor added language to bills regulating concentrated animal feeding operations to exempt a large CAFO, is what they're called, to exempt a large CAFO in southern Cooper County from environmental regulations, even when his constituents are telling him that CAFO stands to destroy a water table and threaten their property values. I could go on and on about the problems that are inherent in Representative Taylor's positions, but reality is that whether or not Representative Taylor says that he doesn't want to be a person that passes laws or does, whether or not he says that he doesn't want to harm his community or does, the votes that he has taken demonstrate that he does not have our community's best interest at heart, at least not the interest of the majority of people I know. To me, allowing him to walk into that job, again, without so much as a job interview, is not acceptable for my neighbors, for the people that I'm running to represent, and for the people who deserve a representative that listens to them and has their best interests at heart.
Let's talk about your platform. You have a formal platform. What are the major components?
Number one thing on my agenda is mental health and substance use treatment in our rural community. I am somebody who is personally living in long-term recovery. I'm very open about that. And so for me, what that means is I was a person who struggled with my own mental health challenges, and ultimately that led me to struggling with my own issues with addiction. I was able to overcome that through access to treatment. I had private insurance. I was able to go to treatment the same day. I had a very supportive family. I had support network. I had all of the things lined up, a lot of privilege there that allowed me to have a successful story and be sitting in this chair with you today. Mm-hmm. But that is not the story of a whole lot of people. As I mentioned just a little bit ago, I work in community mental health. I work in a behavioral health crisis center, and I see individuals who live in the 48th that are coming to me, struggling with the same things I struggled with, but because they're low income, because they have Medicaid, or perhaps because they're uninsured, they don't have the same story that I have. We see them oftentimes 6-7 times in a row. We're telling them that wait lists for treatment centers that can take Medicaid or can take an uninsured person are 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months, 6 months sometimes. And during that time, we've got individuals who are overdosing on drugs like fentanyl. We've got folks who lose hope and are dying from deaths by suicide, frequently with firearms. And whenever we have conversations about mental health in our state, those conversations have often been very focused around our urban centers, our urban communities, and our rural communities have been left without a lifeline. I think about folks in Brunswick. I think about folks in Keatsville or Mendon, folks in Fayette, Funston, Prairie Home, Pilot Grove. Where do you go if you don't have a car? Mm-hmm. How do you get to mental health treatment? Even if you do have a car, how do you get down to Columbia, down to Boonville, down to a place that does have somewhere that can take Medicaid and that can see you for your presenting concerns, right? It's really something that weighs heavy on my mind. And I believe that we have the tools to fix it, but the Republican supermajority and Representative Taylor don't have the interest in doing that. So some key initiatives for me would be, first of all, expanding Medicaid eligibility. That will obviously impact more than just mental health and substance use treatment, but it will have a massive impact on that. Another issue is increasing what we pay folks from our Medicaid funds to offer mental health and addiction treatment. Oftentimes, physical health care services, like if you have a cold or if you need surgery, those are paid out at a much higher rate by the state than those type of mental health services are. So if we can achieve what's called parity, or kind of making those payments more equal, that can make offering those services in rural communities a more viable solution. Additionally, we have a workforce problem. 100% of people living in my district live in what's known as a mental health and service and provider shortage area, which means that we simply do not have enough providers or enough service locations to meet the demand. And that is, in fact, almost 100% of our state. There's only one county in our state that is not deemed one of those shortage areas. Mm-hmm. So we got a lot of work to do in terms of workforce development, but I believe we can offer things like grants, we can offer student loan payback programs, tax incentives. There's lots of things we can do to recruit and retain talent to help us meet those needs. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously a very important thing to me. Additionally, public education is very important to me. I recognize public education as a source of opportunity. I also recognize it as an economic driver in many of our rural communities. For a lot of rural school districts and rural towns, the school district is the single largest employer. When we have policies like school vouchers, like open enrollment, these policies, they stand to erode what little bit of funding we have left in our public schools. There's lots of reports people can read, but to sum them up, Missouri consistently ranks in the bottom 5 for education performance out of 50 states in the nation. We always rank 50th in teacher pay and teacher starting pay. And yet the Republicans and my opponent, who voted for this week, seem to think that we need to siphon more money away from our public schools through things like voucher programs, which are checks that the government writes to people who want to send their kids to private school. In other states that have started voucher programs, oftentimes 85 to 90% of voucher recipients are students who are already in private school. So mostly they're just a transfer payment to wealthy folks. Open enrollment policies also threaten to divert funding away from rural public schools.
How might that work? I don't understand this issue really at all. So if I'm a parent and I have a child and I don't want to send them to the local public school district, I apply for a voucher because I want to send my child to a local Catholic school?
Yeah. The way it currently works is we have what's called a limited voucher program. Say you want to send your kid to a local private school, be it religious or not. First have to qualify for the program, and there's several parameters. Those parameters are very difficult for low-income people to meet, and they actually tend to favor people who are wealthier. But what you would do right now is you would pay for your kids' fall tuition, and then in the spring when you filed your taxes, the government would give you a big fat refund on your taxes that would say, here's your fall tuition and your spring tuition, we covered it. So we're going to pay for that. And where that money comes from is from your school district's tax base. So whatever money the state would have given to your school district, so Fayette Schools, New Franklin, Glasgow, Pilot Grove, Prairie Home, whatever one it is, whatever money your school district would have gotten for your student is now pulled out and it's given to you, the parent, in the form of a tax refund. So it drops public school funding and transfers funding to that family who has a kid in private school. Which, if it really worked the way we're sold as, which the way that it's frequently sold is that this is a great thing for low-income families. It's a great thing for families in general, because who doesn't want more choice, right? We want our families and our kids to have choice. We want to be able to help kids in impoverished schools get out of those impoverished schools and go to private school. We want to help children of color get out of schools that have been historically racially segregated and get them into better private schools that can meet their needs. We want to help disabled children and children with intellectual disabilities get to schools that can actually meet their needs. And these private school vouchers are the way that we do that. But when you look at the data, none of those kids are the ones who get vouchers. The kids who get vouchers are white kids, overwhelmingly white children, who were already in private school, whose families generally have an income of over 6 figures.
Oh, so they're just getting
a check from the government to send their kid to private school. It is a transfer payment to the wealthy.
How do they answer that when it's so clearly within the data?
With this type of program and with data in general, right? We as a country, we want to believe, I think, that we can trust what our elected folks are telling us, right? And for a long time, people have trusted the Republican Party out here. And so I don't know that a lot of people are aware of what data actually exists on these things. And to be fair, a lot of times that data is presented in ways that is either kind of difficult to find or kind of difficult to read and understand, which is why I feel that it's important, when we're knocking doors, when we're having events, when we're doing interviews like this, to be educating people about the realities of this data and trying to do it in a way that is accessible to folks. I tell you what, I'm a master's student, and sometimes I get so sick of hearing about data. I get so sick of hearing about numbers. I get so sick of looking at the reports and the studies and this and that. I can only imagine how somebody who is not a master's student feels about it. So I try to, as much as I can, give that in a way that is accessible and understandable and also lets people know what's going on. Because a lot of times, too, our elected officials are not super transparent about what they're doing down in Jefferson City, right? They are passing bills left and right. They're moving things in and out of committee. A great example is this year's budget, which massive budget, billions of dollars. Generally, this is a multi-day process, a very long thing. There's hearings and there's tons of time for public testimony and amendments and questions. This year, the budget chair, Representative Cody Smith, had a less than 30-second period for people to come in and ask questions before he shut down the hearing. He offered no time for amendments. He just put in the chairman's substitute and sent it to the floor.
And this is business as usual.
This is business as usual under a Republican supermajority, right? Okay. This is referencing back earlier when we don't have people who can check power, when we don't have a diversity of viewpoints in the legislature, this is what we get.
So let's talk more about your platform.
Sure.
Okay, so public education, access to mental health.
Additionally, we are very focused on things like LGBTQIA rights are incredibly important to me. We have had an enormous amount of bills over really the last, probably 7-8 years. It's been a long time that they've been trickling out, but really over the last few years, a lot of the legislature's time has been spent attacking the LGBTQIA community, particularly transgender folks. This is an important issue for folks to know about. One, because the supermajority in Jeff City has blown it out of proportion and also spreads a lot of misinformation. Gender-affirming healthcare is safe. It is proven highly effective. It reduces suicidality in transgender youth and adults. It is always age appropriate, and it's always conducted within a doctor's office with consent of a parent or with consent of a consenting adult if the patient is an adult. Our Republican supermajority, my opponent, has spent a lot of time working to pass laws to ban gender-affirming healthcare, to allow for state funding of anti-LGBTQ hate groups on college campuses, to mandate which bathrooms people can use, right? We have spent hours and hours of government time on these issues. And when I go out and I knock on people's doors or when I talk with them at events, I have never heard anybody tell me that they worried about who's in the stall next to them. It just doesn't come up. So repealing a lot of this very harmful legislation is very important, while also passing legislation that expands protections for LGBTQIA folks, for women and people who can become pregnant, for people of color, is all incredibly important to me. Because I believe when we have a state that protects and celebrates the people in it, when we have a state where people feel that they can come and be happy and thrive, that is exactly what they do. They thrive, and when they thrive, the state thrives, economically, culturally, and in every other way that we can imagine. But we have got to stop attacking groups of people using our power to scare people so that way we can retain our own power. That is simply not something we can do anymore. And I alluded to it in the last one, but obviously a big thing we're hoping will be on the ballot, signatures are getting collected through May 5th, is reproductive rights, abortion. These are issues that are incredibly important. They are fundamental rights. Again, very similar to gender-affirming healthcare. I don't believe I should be in your doctor's office with you or with anyone else unless you're a client of mine and we're working together in a hospital setting and you've asked me to be there. Otherwise, I don't need to be involved in your healthcare. You should be able to make the right decision with a medical professional for you. I am hopeful that we will get abortion on the ballot. I believe that we will. And I believe when it goes to the people, they're going to codify it in our state constitution. But we need to send people to the state house, to the legislature, who will work to continue to defend that. Because the Republicans have made no secret in this state, other states, nationwide, anywhere, that they will gladly work until the day is done to outlaw any access to abortion, to outlaw any access to reproductive health care, to outlaw access to contraceptives, just basic things that people need access to. So we have to be sending folks to the state house who are willing and able to help defend those rights. And that's absolutely crucial to me as well.
Okay. How do people find out about you?
We're really trying to run a multi-pronged campaign on that front. Something that I admit frequently, and I'm not afraid to, is that I am learning as I go here. I am not some person who spent years and years working in politics so I could learn how to run a campaign, so I could run to do this. I am a certified peer specialist and Master of Social Work student who just really cares about ensuring that people are well and are healthy, and that they have people who care about them in positions of power. So I'm still learning and figuring out a lot of this. But what we've come to recognize is that our district is very diverse in terms of age, in terms of the way people are contactable, in terms of the type of either financial or tangible support people can provide. So we have been utilizing social media to really reach out to some of our younger constituents, to reach out to constituents who may be disengaged with the political process. And we've had great success with that. So you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. It's just Joe Jefferies for Missouri HD48. Or if you type in either of those websites and then do the little slash and type in Joe 4 MO 48, the numbers 4 and 48, you'll get to our social media pages. We provide pretty consistent updates on there about what's going on, about policy positions. We've got all of our events there. So that's one way that you can interact. We're also on TikTok under Joe Jefferies, and we're always working for new ways to come up with fun, creative ways to reach out to people through those. We've got email that you can sign up for by going to our website, which is www.joe4mo48, again, the numbers 4 and 8.org. From there, you'll find links to all of our social media. We've got all of our platform up there. They've got an about page about me that details a little bit more about me and my campaign. You can donate, you can sign up to volunteer. So that's a really good hub to be able to go to and kind of navigate around. So lots of different ways that you can reach out there.
Okay, so can you lay out the demographics of 48?
The 48th district is unique in some ways as a more rural district because we do have some areas that skew a bit younger and a bit more colorful than some other districts in Missouri. For example, Howard County, particularly Richmond Township, which is Fayette, actually skews quite a bit younger than your rural average because we have Central Methodist, we have several young families. It also skews a bit more colorful. We've got more folks who are black and brown than most of the rest of the district, except Boonville, which is also a bit more colorful and a bit younger. Otherwise, and it's probably not going to come as a surprise to a lot of listeners, we do have a bit older and a bit whiter demographic than you would find in a more urban setting. Mm-hmm. And that is to be expected in rural America and in rural Missouri. It's definitely been great to have a bit more of a younger and more colorful demographic than the average because we've really been able to engage new and younger people. Mm-hmm. For example, we had our canvassing kickoff on last Sunday and our campaign kickoff the night before. And I had several people who came out and said, well, I've not been involved in politics, but I saw this and I had to come, and were asking great questions about what does a state representative do and how can I help and how can I learn more about campaigning and this and that. So really grateful that we have new and exciting demographics to tap into and new folks who are coming into the fold. Because one of my big things, and I don't think people realize it, is the media, the news, they really love to talk about who's going to be the next president of the United States. That is their favorite topic right now. But our state houses, our state senates, our secretaries of state, our governors, everybody at the state level, there is so much that happens, so much of your life that you don't even realize is being determined by state government, is being determined by state government. So it's great to see new people engaging. It's great to see folks coming out and supporting, and I'm really happy with that.
How do you reach out to the older, whiter, more conservative demographic who maybe are aware of the downside of the supermajority kind of doing things unchecked and are perhaps a little bit on the fence?
I think that the key thing to recognize with this older, whiter demographic, because it'll come as no shock to anybody who knows me that's listening, but I am younger, I am queer, I don't look like your average politician, I own up to it, I think it's an okay thing, and I find a lot of people who agree, but I get that at first, people's reaction may be, we would agree on nothing. But when I actually am able to talk with folks who are a little bit more conservative, maybe in that moderate range, they would self-identify, a little bit older, a little bit whiter. When we actually sit down and talk, we have far more common ground than we have differences. Great example. I was talking with a voter the other day who, we have some different ideas about firearm policy, but what we could agree on was that we wanted safe communities, we wanted our kids to feel safe in schools, and we wanted suicide rates to be low, right? And those are three things that I think a lot of people can agree on. He would have thought that my initial policy would be, well, I want to take everyone's guns away, which is not the case. That's unconstitutional, and unlike my opponent, I don't believe that I get to pick and choose which constitutional rights I will and won't defend. But I do think that with all rights come responsibilities. So if you are having a mental health crisis, I believe that it is okay for the government or for law enforcement to be able to temporarily remove a firearm from the home while you get the help that you need. I don't think it should be forever. I don't think that you shouldn't be able to get it back. But I do think that you deserve to be safe. And we were able to agree on that. I talked about how I didn't want schools to be fortresses. I thought that we should ensure that we had reasonable restrictions on the type of firearms that individuals could hold, so that way we could help ensure our children are safe whenever we send them out of our homes. And we were able to agree on that, right? So when we're able to slow down and actually have a conversation and not just assume things about one another, I tended to find that there's a lot more agreement than there is not. The other program that we're working to scale for that is called our Credible Messenger program. That really stems from a fact that I am self-aware. And I recognize I am not the most credible messenger on every issue. And by that, I don't mean that I don't know what I'm talking about, because I do my research. But for example, on firearm policy, which I just spoke to, I'm not a firearm owner and I never have been. But there are people who are firearm owners who agree with me, who think safe storage laws are reasonable, who think that being able to have a firearm temporarily withheld while somebody's in a mental health crisis is reasonable, who agree on reasonable restrictions on magazine capacity and firearm firing speed, right? They are credible messengers. They're firearm owners, hunters, people who enjoy the sport of shooting. And bringing them into our fold so that way they can introduce us to folks in spaces who they are close to, who they have built trust with, gives us a leg up in terms of walking into those rooms and building trust, right? Because if I just walk into some spaces, I'm probably not going to be heard very well. But if I walk in with somebody who has been talking to these groups or a member of these groups for a very long time, well, we have a lot better chance of being able to have a conversation than the other way around.
What are some other areas where you have successfully found common ground with this demographic?
The education piece is a big one. I don't know anybody who doesn't want to protect their local public school district. And I have nothing, let me be clear, There's nothing I have against private schools, but private schools are a private choice, right? There's no public option for private schools. So we're generally able to find pretty good agreement that once we learn about what a school voucher is, once we learn about the possible damage caused by open enrollment, we tend to agree more than we disagree. Additionally, we actually tend to have a lot of agreement around climate change things than you would think, especially because I approach it from a position of people who work the land, live off the land, tend to know the land best and know what it needs. Again, an area where I've done my research, but I'm not the most credible messenger. But when we talk about things like regenerative agriculture policy, when we talk about things like our CAFOs and our large animal feeding operations threatening the land on which we farm, when we talk about ways that we can build jobs for generations through vocational and technical educational programming. So that way we have folks who are able to install solar, who are able to work on EVs, who are able to do all of these jobs of the future. When we really start to sit down and think about that, we agree a lot more than we disagree, especially when it's talked about in an appropriately paced way. We're not phasing anything out immediately. We're building capacity, right? We tend to agree on more than we disagree on, but people have to be willing to have that conversation, and that's sometimes the tough part.
How many hands have you shaken?
I've shaken quite a few at this point.
Okay.
We are definitely wanting to scale that more. One of the things I talk about quite a bit is that there are two things that I'm up against. There's opposition and there's resistance. Opposition is people who will never vote for me, will never think about it. When they looked at me, they would probably feel repulsed, right? There's a good 35% of the population that is just not going to vote for me. And I get that, right? The next portion of people are the group I would call resistance, right? And they are people who are either persuadable or who are going to vote for me but don't want to be vocal about it, or who would, whisper in the Casey's that, hey, are you the guy with the Facebook ads? Okay, I'll vote for you, but I don't want anybody knowing about it, Those are the folks that I would classify in the resistance category. And they're the people who I'm trying to reduce friction with.
Mm-hmm.
Because we need folks to go out and volunteer. I've got 23,000 registered voters in this district, approximately 16,000 doors, 23,000 phone numbers, right? I can't do that all on my own. We need folks to volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
We need folks to knock doors, to talk to their neighbors. We've got a great grassroots organizing app people can add to their phone. It's called Reach. You just join my campaign and you can type in that you talk to your neighbor. It'll go directly to my voter file, whether they're supporting or not, whether they want to volunteer or donate. We have tried to make this as accessible for folks as possible because I recognize that your neighbors are the people you can persuade best. Your friends and family are the people who you can persuade best. And I want to give all of our constituents, all of our supporters, all of the tools possible so that way they can relationally organize in their life. So that way we can all together build the Missouri that we know is possible.
Okay, well, I wish you the best, and I want to say thank you for making the time to come and talk to me, and I hope we can do this again as the campaign evolves and positions become more pointed and you get starting to debate with Tim Taylor and see how that goes in the future. So,
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I will gladly come back. I'm looking forward to being able to update folks about the campaign, and I really appreciate your invitation. Absolutely anytime.
okay, thanks so much.